Okay, I'm going to be using this Snuggly Woogly or Snoogly Woogly. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's by Loops and Threads. It's like a baby weight yarn. And so it's a lightweight number 3. And I just love how lovely and cushy and cozy it is. So I think it'll be perfect for this cardigan. And they recommend a 4mm hook. I'm actually going to be using a 5. A lot of you who know me know I like to always go up a hook size if I want my stitches to sit nice and relaxed. So the hook size is a 5mm hook, which is also known as an H or a size 8. Okay. And I picked up about 4 skeins. I think I'm going to be okay. I've already started on one of these skeins here. They come in 141 grams per skein, and that's going to give you 408 meters or 446 yards. I'm never the greatest at really deducing how much I need. I remember when I did that kimono, the beach cover-up kimono, I used about 1,500 meters. So that always kind of is the gauge I go by. So I've got about 400 meters here. So I think in total I have 1,600 meters. I think I'll be okay. White is a pretty regular color that they carry. And it's just a color number, but it is like a white color. And I've already started one of my panels here. I've completed the front panels and I still have a little bit left over. So I think I'm gonna be okay for creating all the panels and then putting it together. So the other thing you're gonna make sure you wanna have on hand is a trusty pair of scissors and of course a yarn needle to weave in your ends and sew your panels together. The other thing you're going to want to have on hand is a sizing chart, which you can find on crochetcrafty.com. You can download it for absolutely free, and that way you can go by your particular size. And the other thing I recommend you downloading while you're on the site is the garment design template. That way you can mark down the measurements that you're taking, and there is a little template where you can draw your design onto the body outline there. And I just think it's a handy little tool. It helps you visualize kind of where you're going with your garment. So once you've got all those things together, then we're ready to get started. Okay, so before we even pick up our hook, we need to just kind of settle on our general design and our measurements. So we know our general design. It's going to be just a basic cardigan, drop shoulder, but we're using those granny rectangles. So first thing you just want to do is kind of just map out what the basic idea is going to look like. So basically we want a back panel, okay, that's going to sit around the back. And then for me, I kind of like it almost to be like a duster length, not quite floor length, but I like it to be a little bit longer, so it's going to be somewhere around there. So that's one panel. Okay, so that's for the back. And then in the front, we're going to have 2 side panels. And basically, there's going to be an opening for the neck. Like that. So you've got, let me just bring this a little closer. So you've got the back panel going across the back, and then you've got a second panel here, and a third panel here. Then you need 2 more panels, and that is for your sleeves. So you're going to have another, basically a rectangle there and a rectangle there. Now, obviously, these sleeves are super long here, but just to give you the basic idea. So essentially, we have a rectangle, a large rectangle for the back panel, okay? Then we've got 2 narrower rectangles for the front panels, okay? And then we've got 2 rectangles for the sleeves. So you see, it's 5 rectangles is all you're going to be worrying about. So 5 panels is what we need to create, and then we're going to construct the cardigan, and it's going to be nice and easy. So let's just talk about the measurements here. And this is why I want to make sure, I want you to make sure that you have this crochet sizing chart, and then you can reference it so that if you don't have the person in front of you to measure, then you can kind of go by these general measurements, okay? So if they tell you, oh, I'm generally a small, then you can kind of go by the measurements listed below. It is in both inches and centimeters, okay? So on my little sheet here, that also comes with your template, I've already put some measurements in. So the first measurement you want to take is whatever widest circumference measurement you have. So for me, it's my bust. My bust is my widest measurement, like from the waist up anyway. And so that is 46 inches. So that is if I take a measuring tape and I measure all the way around. So I want to take that measurement first because that's generally going to give me an idea of how the cardigan is going to sit around me. I like my cardigans with lots of ease. I don't like it to fit nice and tightly. If you would like to make a cardigan that sits more snugly, then you might want to go to the next measurement down. So maybe for you, if your waist is your smallest measurement and you want it to sit snugly around the bust area, if you plan on closing your cardigan, of course, then maybe go by the waist measurement. But I'm going to go by my bust measurement. So for me, that's 46 inches. And then the next measurement I want to take is my neck opening. Now, usually when you take a neck measurement, they're asking you to take the full circumference. I just want the measurement of the opening. So basically, it's going to be where my cardigan is going to sit open here, right? So if I bring back this girl here, it's essentially this measurement. So that is the opening and not the circumference, okay? So for me, that's going to be 5 inches. And of course, the next measurement you want to take is just generally how long you want your cardigan to be. So for me, I know that from the back of the neck all the way to, just below my hips around mid-thigh, it's going to be 30 inches. So that is the third measurement that I take, okay? And then, so you've got your main body, and then we talk about the sleeves. Now, this is going to be a drop shoulder, so I'm not going to start my measurement up here. When I start measuring, I'm going to start measuring approximately there, and I'll tell you why in a moment. So I'm going to measure from here, not all the way to the wrist, because I am going to crochet a cuff. I'm just going to go, maybe an inch or 2 above the wrist. So for me, that length is 17 inches. So that is my next measurement that I take, okay? And then of course, lastly, you want your arm circumference. Now, notice I crossed off the wrist measurement because remember, we got to fit our arm through that armhole. So I'm actually going to take a measurement. I'm going to use my measuring tape and I'm going to put it around the widest part of my arm. So that way it'll fit through very comfortably. And then I'm okay with this being nice and relaxed in the arm. Again, if you want yours to sit a bit snugly, then perhaps you would use your wrist measurement. So for me, all the way around my arm is 15 inches. Okay, so that is my 5th measurement I'm going to take. So once you've got these measurements, Then we can go back to our rectangles. So I actually already started a panel here. So I'll just show you guys here. So I've already got my first panel here, and I started with the first side panel. So I'm starting in the front with these two rectangles here. In order to figure out your measurements, I would start off by figuring out what your back measurement is first, and then you can kind of work out the rest. I just feel like it's a lot easier. Okay, now with these measurements, this is how we are going to figure out how to size our rectangles. And a few weeks back, I had done a crochet quick chat all about how you can figure out how to size your granny rectangles. This is a huge question I've been asked over the years. So for really, really in-depth detail, make sure to check out that lesson, that crochet lesson, and I'm going to leave a link for it in the description box down below. And that way you can reference it anytime for any other project. So here you're going to get a general idea for my size, how I will do it. Now, just so you know, just for a bit of relatability and kind of visualization. So my bust measurement is 46 inches. So technically I would fall under the extra large size. So for those of you more curvier shaped girlies, you can follow along with me. I'm doing the extra large. Now, of course, if your size goes like a XX or a 3X, then again, that crochet tutorial all about how to size up your rectangles will help you a lot, okay? So start off by figuring out the size of your back panel. So remember I said that my bust circumference is 46 inches. You're gonna take that measurement and you're gonna divide that by 2. So for me, that's gonna give me 23 inches, okay? And so that is actually going to be the width of my back panel, okay? So if you divide that in half, that would give you, now if you're doing a pullover, for example, this would give you 2 panels of 23 inches. So right now, all we need to know is that my back panel is 23 inches. For me, what's gonna happen is it's not going to sit perfectly square here. It is going to go out a bit further than my shoulders, and that is going to create that drop shoulder. So remember I said we're going to start here to measure our sleeve, and that is why. So this would droop down this way here. I hope that makes sense. So that is my back panel, okay? And then we know that I already said my length was going to be 30 inches. Okay, so you've got that. For your 2 front panels, you might think that it's, oh, okay, I'm going to take these 23 and divide it in half, right? 23 divided in half is not an even number. So that's going to give me 11 and a half. But remember that I said I wanted a 5-inch opening here. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your back panel measurement, which I have 23, and I'm going to take away 5, which is my neck opening measurement. And that is going to give me 18 inches, okay? Then you take that 18 inches and divide it by 2, because you're going to make 2 panels, and now you've got 9 inches. So what I want to do here is make sure that my width on my panels, my front panels, are 9 inches, okay? Hopefully you can see that. My length, of course, is still 30, right? Because it's going to match the back. And there you go. So I know the dimensions of my back panel, dimensions of my 2 front panels. Now let's talk about the sleeves. So I know my length is 17 inches. And my circumference, because remember this panel, we're going to fold it in half. So it's going to go around your arm. And it was 15 inches. Okay. And that would be the same for this one. 17 and 15. So I always like to kind of map it out like this so I can see visually what I have to deal with. So in total, we're going to need 5 panels, And these are our measurements. So this is the back panel. These two are the front. And of course, these are the sleeves. Okay, so these will be a replica of each other. So you've got 2 sleeves, 2 front panels. Please do remember, anytime you make 2 of something, they're never going to be exactly, because, you know, our tension changes, we relax or we tighten. So if you end up being off by 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, even a full inch, don't panic. It's just the nature of the beast. And that's what makes it a piece of art. It's yours, it's homemade. Don't stress about it, okay? So once you've got your measurements, you know how many panels you need. Now let's get going. So I'm gonna get you guys started actually on, so I started with my front panel, but I'm gonna get you started on the back panel and how to figure out how many chains to start with. Okay, so back panel, nice big rectangle. And our measurement was 23 inches across. I want to do this nice and even. I'm going to add 1 more inch. So I'm going to make this 24 inches just because I want this to be an even number, okay? And then we've got our length, which is 30 inches. So 30 inches long, 24 inches. Now, because we're starting in the center to create a spine, and then we're going to work in the round, we want to make sure that we are expanding equally on the length as well as on the width. And you might be thinking, but that's impossible because your length is always going to be longer than the width for a rectangle. Well, this is how you figure that out. You take your length and you subtract your width, okay? So 30 minus 24, that's going to give me 6. So 6 inches will be the initial chain length that I need to work up, okay? So if I have 6 inches here, that means I will eventually work up 24 inches. So if I want all sides to expand evenly, it always has to go according to the short side. So 24, because our spine is really thin, right? So if you divide that in half, you've got 12 inches on each side of this spine. So that means that this rectangle will expand 12 inches on this side, 12 inches on this side. Therefore, it also has to expand 12 inches up and 12 inches down. And if you do the math, 12 and 12 is 24, plus 6 gives you 30. So we know that our initial chain has got to start with 6 inches, and then your rounds will always expand exactly the same amount to give you this width. So again, I go into much deeper detail in that crochet quick chat, so make sure to check that out. So for me, we're going to do the back panel. We're going to start off by initial chain that's going to go up to 6 inches, okay? Okay, so we're going to begin by placing a slip knot on our hook. We're just going to work up a chain. So I'm going to work up a chain that's going to give me 6 inches. You're going to work up a chain of whatever length that you need for your spine. So I'm just going to work my way up and really try not to chain too tightly. If you are a tight crocheter, I would recommend for this little part here, just go up a hook size and see how you do. Okay, so I have chained up 27 chains to reach my 6 inches. Notice I'm not stretching it. See, when you stretch it, it's going to go longer. Now, the thing is with crochet garments is once we start stitching into it, sometimes it will shrink. And then with wear, sometimes it stretches out. So I just always keep it nice and even and relaxed like that. So I have 27 chains, and actually I would recommend if you ended up having 26, for example, go up 1 more stitch so that you have an odd number of stitches, and you'll see why once we start getting into the stitch pattern. So I have 27 chains, and then what I am going to do is I'm going to just chain 1 more to give me a little height to work with here, okay? And then what I'm going to do is into the second chain from the hook, I am going to place a half double crochet stitch. So I'm going to go into the chain there and place a half double crochet. And then what you're going to do is you are going to chain 1 and then go back into that same stitch and place another half double crochet. So what we're doing here is we're just creating our first little corner here. And in fact, I would recommend actually you grab just a little stitch mark or something and just insert it into that chain 1 space just to remind you. So that's our first corner. And now all you're going to do is just continue placing 1 half double crochet into each chain all the way down until you have 1 stitch left. And I'll tell you what's going to happen then. Okay, so I have my last stitch left here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a half double crochet. I'm going to chain 1 and place another half double crochet, and it's okay if that chain is stretching. Okay, so this is my next corner here. And again, let's place a marker there so that it's easy to identify. Now I'm coming around the bend here, so I'm going to chain 1 and back into that same spot, I'm going to place a half double crochet. So there's my other corner, and I'm just going to grab another marker here and just go into that chain 1 space. And I know it's kind of tight right now because we're just starting the very first round of our spine here. So we've got this corner and this corner. So now we're going to come down the other side of our little skinny rectangle here. And you are just going to continue to place 1 half double crochet now into each of the chains along the bottom. So this one's already been worked into. See how stretched out it is? So the next one will be right there. So what you want to do is make sure that you have 27 stitches still on each side. So remember we started off with 27 chains. So these are the chain spaces. So in between your markers, you're going to have 27 stitches on this side, 27 stitches on this side, and then you've got that extra little stitch on each end, and that's going to start to form your short side. So go ahead and do that. Then we'll meet you close to the end of round number 1. Okay, so this is stitch number 26. And now stitch number 27 is back into that very first chain. Look at how stretched that is. So we're going to place a half double crochet here. We're going to chain 1 to form our next corner. And here is the very first half double crochet that we stitch. Remember we did that little chain 1? So all you're going to do is you're just going to slip stitch into that stitch there. And of course, I would recommend you placing a stitch marker in that one as well, if I can find, here it is. Just like that. So now round 1 is complete, and your work looks something like this. So there are the first 2 corners, and then there's the other 2 corners. So you have a very, very skinny rectangle. So this is now the foundation of how we're going to build up our work. So what we're going to do to begin round number 2, we are going to slip stitch into this corner space here. And I always like to work from the corners because it will hide our seam a lot nicer. So I'm just going to take that out for a moment. Okay, so round number 2, we are using the mesh stitch, okay? So we're going to begin by creating a corner here. So coming out of the corner, we are going to chain 4. So we have 1, 2, these 2 will count as a half double crochet, and then 3 and 4 are going to count as our chain 2 corner. Now you notice I only chained 1 in round 1. That was just so that we didn't have too many stitches to start. So this counts as a half double crochet, and chain 2. And now we're going to go back into that corner space and place a half double crochet. Just like that. And we have our corner. And of course, if it helps, make sure you replace your stitch marker. Now what we're going to do is we're going to chain 1. We're going to skip our next stitch and make sure that you count this stitch here. Sometimes it gets hidden here. So count that stitch. You're going to skip that and you're going to go into the next stitch right here, and we're going to half double crochet. But for this project, we're always going to stitch into the back loop only. So it's the loop that's furthest away from you. I hope you guys can see that. So I'm going to go in through the back loop. And if you can, see how there's only one loop? Sometimes I really try and see if I can pick up a second loop in the back just to give me a little bit more sustenance there. And then I'm going to half double crochet. And so that is our mesh stitch. So then I chain 1, I skip the next stitch, and into the following stitch, I work a half double crochet into that back loop only as well. Okay, chain 1 and repeat. Skip, next stitch, half double crochet. See? So you're going to get this nice little lacy effect. So that's what you're going to do all the way down. I'll meet you at that corner there. Okay, so I've made my way down the side here, and I have 1 stitch left, which is perfect. I'm going to chain 1. I'm skipping this stitch, and now look at that, I have a corner. So I'm just going to take that marker out for a second. So I'm going to skip this stitch. I'm going to go into the corner and half double crochet, and in the corners we always half double crochet, chain 2, and half double crochet. And then I would replace my marker. Okay, and then I'm going to chain 1, skip the next stitch. So remember, we have 1 stitch here. So this is a corner and this was a corner. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to skip over to the next corner here, and I'm going to create another corner. So I'm going to place a half double crochet, chain 2, and back into that same space and half double crochet and replace the marker. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, so now our rectangle is starting to form a little bit more clearly. Yeah, so this was the corner and then this was the corner, so that one got stretched out a bit. So we skipped this stitch here, so that's why you have a chain 1 there. The chain 2s are always in the corner and the chain 1s are along the side. Now it looks lopsided because we haven't done this side yet. Now once you come around the bend here, you're just going to continue as you did before. Chain 1, skip the next stitch. Remember, coming out of the corner, this is the one you skip, and you go into the following. Chain 1, skip, next stitch there. So hopefully now these 2 corners make a lot more sense. See that? It's a little wonky here. So there you go. So this is our starting chain here. First little 2 tiny corners, and now this is round number 2, and now you can see where those corners are falling into place. Okay, so continue on down the second side. Okay, so I now have come up to the next corner, so I'm going to skip this next stitch here after I chain 1. So I have 1 stitch there and then the corner. So I'm just going to take that marker out and I'm going to go into the corner there. Half double crochet, chain 2, and then half double crochet back into that same space and replace my marker. Once your work starts to grow, eventually you probably won't even need these markers, but in the beginning, because it's so narrow up here, I like to mark my spots so I don't get confused. So then I'm going to chain 1 and we're going to skip this next stitch here So don't be fooled by this little, it looks like there's 2 stitches here. That was just the chain 1 at the beginning. So you're just going to ignore that. Chain 1, and what you're going to do is you're going to slip stitch to the top of the 2nd chain there. And that's what's going to close off round number 2. Okay. So there you have it. There's your 2 corners and your short side. So at the end of round number 2, your work looks something like this. So you've got your initial spine, which is just consisting of half double crochet stitches. And then round number 2 is your eyelet row or your mesh stitch row, or round, I should say. I keep saying rows. So this is basically going to be the repeat. You're going to continue alternating between solid rounds and mesh stitch rounds. So I'm just going to start you off again on round number 3, just to kind of get you going here. So I always, once I slip stitch here, I will always then slip stitch into the corner so that I can begin from the corner. Now in round number 3, because it's an odd numbered round, we are going to do a solid round. So we are going to chain 4 again, 1, 2, 3, and 4. This counts as a half double crochet and a chain 2. But in my solid rounds, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place 2 half double crochets here. Okay, 1 and then 2, just like that. If you want, you can replace your marker. And now I'm going to place a half double crochet into each and every single stitch, including the chain spaces here. So remember that you don't want to miss this stitch here. So I like to go right into that stitch there. So your loops always sit to the right of your stitch. That's why it's important you don't miss that. So I'm not working into the back loops for this round, so I've done that. So then what I do is I'll just work into the space and then the actual stitch. Then the space and then the stitch. And you're just going to keep repeating that. So you see that? Now that's going to kind of draw attention to that eyelet there. Look how pretty that is. So you're going to do that all the way down, and I'll just meet you up at that corner again just to go over what we're going to do there. Okay, so I've gone down that first side there. So here is my corner, and this is what you're going to do every time you do a solid round. So in your corners, you're always going to place 2 half double crochet stitches, chain 2, and then 2 more half double crochet stitches. And I found that this method of alternating between your mesh stitch and your full rows just makes it sit really, really nicely. Okay. And then you're just going to work across your short side here. So remember, we've got a stitch right there coming out of the corner. Okay. And then you've got a chain space here. And then a stitch. So you have 3 stitches coming out of that corner. See that? So now you've got your corner, your next corner, and you will do the same thing. You will place 2 half double crochet stitches, and then chain 2 and go back into that same stitch and place 2 more half double crochets. There we go. Now you, whoops. Now you can really see that your corners are becoming much more prominent. Okay. And then as always, coming out of the corner, make sure you do not skip that first stitch there. And then you go into the space and into the stitch. Into the space and into the stitch. Okay, So now you can see that your rectangle is growing, okay? And so this is now what you're going to continue to repeat until you get your desired dimensions. So just a couple of things here. Just gauge your corners. Sometimes what happens is with these solid corners, you might feel like it's starting to fan. If you notice that happening, it could be that because you're chaining too loosely, or as we generally work up, creating a larger panel, that does tend to happen sometimes. So feel free to judge. You might want to go back to creating corners with just one stitch, a chain 2 and 1. Sometimes what I experiment with as well is instead of chaining 2, I'll chain 1. So just alternate with that. Your mesh stitch rounds in the corner, they always get 1 half double crochet, chain 2, 1 half double crochet. In the solid rounds, it's always 2, chain 2, 2, and then you can kind of gauge as you go along. And that is the repeat. So you're going to keep alternating that around and around and around until you get your dimensions. So for my back panel, I'm going to keep going until I reach my 30-inch length and the 23 inches across. Now remember, you may get to 30 inches and all of a sudden you have like 25 inches across. Don't panic. It's just a thing. It happens sometimes. Like I said, you might be an inch here or so off, but in the general method here does work, okay? So that's what you're gonna do for your back panel. And once you're done that, then you're gonna work out your 2 front panels. After that, then you work out your 2 sleeve panels, and then we will put the cardigan together. Okay, so now to work out the sleeves, it's gonna be the exact same thing. So I'm not gonna crochet it with you. It's the exact same pattern as the back panel, but I do wanna go over the fact that my sleeve measurements, just so that you can see how I get mine. So, sorry, not my sleeve measurements, my front panels. So we know that my front panels are still gonna be 30 inches, but the width is only going to be 9 inches. Okay, so remember what we do. We take our length, we minus our width. So 30 minus 9 gives me 21. Okay, so I know that because this is a narrower triangle, remember in the back panel, we only needed 6 inches because we had a much wider panel. Here our panel is narrower, so our chain is going to be longer. So I know for my front panel, I'm going to have to start with a chain that's going to give me 21 inches. And that way, each corner or each side is going to grow by 4.5. 4.5 and 4.5. Right? So as you go in the round, they all will increase at the same rate. So remember, 4.5 and 4.5 is what's going to give you 9. And then 4.5 and 21 plus 4.5 gives you 30. So that's how I'm going to do my front panel. And then if we're talking about our sleeve, my measurements, so my length is 17 inches and my width is 15. Okay, so this is for my sleeve. So I do the same thing. I take my longest measurement, so I have 17. I minus 15, and look at that. I only have 2 inches. So dimensionally, this is narrower than the front panel. Okay, so I'm going to start off with 2 inches. Okay, and then, so if I divide 15.5 and 2, it's going to grow by, I want it to grow by 7.5 and 7.5. And obviously I'm not the best artist, so this does not look to scale. Okay, so 7.5 times 2 is going to give me the 15. And then 7.5 plus 2 plus 7.5 gives me 17. So this is how I calculated my front panel. This is how I calculated my sleeve. So now that you're onto your sleeve, you're going to start with the chain for that length. And then once you're done your 2 front panels, you're going to do your 2 sleeve panels, and you're going to work it out in the same way. So again, I'm doing mine for an extra large. So if you're following along exactly with me, you're going to use the same measurements. All right, so it's probably going to be a while before you come back to me because you've got a few more panels to go. Once you've got all 5 panels, then we're going to talk about the full construction of our cardigan. Okay, so I have finished all 5 of my pieces. So you can see I've got all 5 of my pieces laid out. So I have my back panel, my 2 front panels, and my sleeves. So I've got them set out this way because that is how we're going to sew it together. So the first thing you want to do is you're going to sew your 2 front panels together. Now I've got the wrong sides facing out. So if I bring this down like this, sorry for all the noise in the background, guys. There's some trucks or something going by here, so I gotta keep filming. Okay, so your front panels will look like this. So sorry, I'm moving the camera around so you guys can see, and it fits all in here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take these front panels and we're gonna sew the shoulder seams together, okay? You're just gonna hand sew that. You can do a whip stitch or a ladder stitch, whatever you choose. You can see there is a little gap here for the neck opening, which is exactly what we want. So the best thing to do is always start from the outer edge and work your way in when you're sewing your seams here, okay? And that way, you'll always have something nice and even in the center. And then when I come here, I start at that end and I sew this way. Now, make sure, I mean, it's up to you, but I always find that it works out best if you actually put right sides together. So you can see this is the side with the texture and this is the side with the texture. So I'm going to take these 2 sides and I will put them facing each other, and that is how I am going to seam up my shoulder seams, okay? So once you do your shoulder seams, then you want to open this up kind of like I had it, and we are going to then seam up our sleeves. So first the shoulders, then the sleeves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and sew up my shoulders, and then I'm going to come back on and show you exactly how I center my sleeve to sew my sleeve on. Okay, so I've got one panel here on the front. So I've got the right sides, the one with the texture is facing each other. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna take a nice long piece of yarn. Okay, so I always like to get at least twice the length of what I need to sew, and then a little bit extra. Because depending on the stitch you use, sometimes it just needs a little bit more yarn. So I've got my nice long strand here. I'm gonna thread my yarn needle. Whoops. Okay, and now I'm gonna start from the edge here. So what I want to do is I want to find the very first little stitch. So remember we had a little chain space here in the corner? That is where I'm going to begin. So I'm going to insert my needle here and I'm going to do it in the corresponding chain space there. And that is where I'm going to begin sewing up my sides. So I'm going to make a little knot here. And I always like to leave this tail to be a little bit longer. I can always weave that in at the end. Just for some reason, it makes me feel better to do that. And I find it's a little easier to hide that when it's a little longer. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use something called the mattress stitch. So I'm going to simply just go in through this very first stitch here. Okay, make sure to pick up both loops. And then I'm going to find the corresponding stitch right here. So that's a chain space. And then this is the first stitch right there. Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna go in through the front, coming out through the back. And then all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move into the next stitch and I'm gonna come from the back and I'm going to come out through the front. And again, corresponding stitches always. So these two stitches match up. And so this creates like kind of like a ladder effect or a zigzag effect. So I'm always coming in through the back, out the front, and then I go in through the front in the next stitch and out through the back. And all I'm doing is always matching up the corresponding stitches like that. Okay, so come out the back. Now I'm going to come in through the back and out through the front. I hope that makes sense. Nice and easy. So I go in, out, in, out. And I just keep going back and forth. And I do that until I get to the end of my panel here. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the other panel, but I'm going to start from this side out. So that means it's going to feel weird to sew from left to right, unless of course you're left-handed. So what I would do is I would maybe pin the panel and then turn it this way and then just work from right to left if you're right-handed. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do these two panels and then I'll pop back on. We'll talk about the sleeves. So this is the right side. So you can see this is where they've joined. And this is what the seam looks like using the ladder stitch. I'm pretty happy with that. So it's a very nice flat join and it's pretty nice and even on the inside too. So you're not going to feel like a bulky seam there. Okay, so those are your shoulder seams. Now let's move on to the sleeves. Okay, so I've got my shoulder seams sewn together. So that's the edge there, and this is the edge here. So you can see my neck opening. So it looks like this little bit of a T shape here. Now we're ready to do our sleeves. So right now everything is still looking pretty flat. So what we want to do is we want to take our sleeve panel, and again we want the right sides facing to each other. So you can see the texture is here, texture is here. So I will then flip this and sew the sleeve onto here. Now, the idea is that we want to find the midpoint of our sleeve, right? And we want to match it with our shoulder seam. So that's going to give you a nice, even finish. Now, in this particular one, I had left a long tail. So I'm going to use this side here. So this is the tail I'm going to use to sew this sleeve on. But I have to make sure that it sits nice and even. So the easiest way to do that is to fold your panel in half, and wherever that stitch falls, it's right on that bend, that's where you're going to place a little marker here. Now I can open this up, and where I have the stitch marker, I'm also going to attach it right into that seam where these two pieces were sewn together. So this will guarantee that I have a nice even sleeve. So I have the same width on one side of the shoulder as I do on the other. So that's my center point. And now from here, I want to make sure that I have the same number of stitches on each side. And then I'm going to place a stitch marker here. So a great way that you can do this, because I've got these little eyelets here, is I'm just going to count how many eyelets. So my stitch marker falls right in between here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 on that side. So I should now make sure that I have 17 on this side. So the eyelets are these little spaces here. So this is the seam. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. So just make sure that my last eyelet matches up there. And then I will place a stitch marker in the very first stitch. And so over here, that's going to be the corner space. And then make sure that it sits even. Like if this side goes longer, then you know you're off by a stitch or so. You can also count the individual stitches. I just figured it's much easier to count the eyelets. And then we would do the same thing on this side and place your stitch marker. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Phew, we have the same number. So I've got to find now, starting from the seam, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. So to make sure that this last, now it's not the corner space here. Whoops. It's not this top corner space here. It's this one right here. I'm going to match that up with this eyelet right here. And that means that this little corner space is going to match over 2 stitches over from here. So I have 1 and 2. that's the chain space there. And I'm just going to put my little marker. So I've secured my spots. So my center and my outer edges. And then make sure that they sit nice and flat. If there's any buckling, it means that it's not even. So it looks pretty good there. So now with my tail, I'm just now going to start sewing. Same method I did for the shoulders, from one end all the way to the other. You're going to do the same method with the other sleeve, okay? Once you've got your sleeves done, then all of the pieces have been sewn together, and then we're going to just do a final sew to construct the actual cardigan. So go ahead and do your sleeves, and then I'll meet back up with you in just a minute. Okay, so your cardigan should now have all of its pieces sewn together. So there are the two shoulders, and here is, don't have enough room on this screen to show you guys. So here is one of the sleeve panels. So you can see how now it's just connected really nicely. It's got a nice smooth finish. And same thing on the other side. So essentially you have something like a big kind of X or cross that you formed by sewing all of these pieces together. So this is my right side facing towards me. So now all you're going to do is you're going to take your front panels and bring them down. And hopefully I can fit this in the screen here. And so once you bring your front panel down, now you're going to have the wrong side facing out, which is what we want. So you want to just make sure that it evens out nicely at the bottom here. And now you're going to see that your sleeve panel is going to want to fold, which is exactly what we want. And then all you're going to do is you're going to get a nice long piece of yarn, and you are going to sew from the edge of the sleeve here under the arm and all the way down the side seam. Now you can start from the bottom and work your way to the sleeve, or the sleeve back the other way. It does not matter. So that's what you're going to do there. So you do that on this side, and then you do the same thing on the other side. So essentially what you want to do is you want to make sure that your ends match up nicely, because you don't want to have an edge that's wonky. So similar to what we did when we first put the sleeve on, I would probably just get a safety pin or some stitch markers and attach those together there. And then I'd find another spot right under the arm where the sleeves will match up, pin that. And then at the end where the sleeves finish. And at least now you know where your starting and your end points are. So if there's any wonkiness in the middle, you can always kind of stitch two stitches together. But if you kept your stitch count consistent, you should not have that issue at all. Okay, so that is basically the last thing you're going to do. And then your cardigan is basically constructed. So then all we're going to do is just some last finishing touches, because of course we want to finish off this neckline to look a little bit nicer. And depending on how long your sleeves came out for you, we may want to do a little trim at the end. But for now, I'm just going to leave you to sew up your side seams. And then this is going to be the exciting part, because then you'll be able to try this on and really see how it sits on you or the person that you're making it for. Okay, guys, so here it is, the final result. So you can see now how the cardigan comes together. So the sleeves are sewn on. And so we've got our opening here. Now you could do a finishing round, and normally it's something I do, but this is the first time I was actually quite happy with the way it all came together when I sewed it up, that I decided to just leave it nice and simple like this. Now I must admit, it's a little big on me now. I actually started this project several months back, and I've lost a little bit of weight. So it is a little bit larger on me. But I always prefer things to sit a little bit more loosely than tight. So this is how it turned out using, you can see the granny rectangle shape, and you can see it here in the panels. So isn't that neat? All we did is we used our rectangle motif, and we took 5 of them and made our cardigan. So I hope you guys really enjoyed working on this, especially if you love the granny rectangle motif. And by adding this little mesh stitch, we really just gave it a little bit of interesting detail, which is going to make it perfect for a springtime cardigan. Now, if you guys have any detailed questions, as always, you can leave them for me in the comment box down below. But of course, you can always email me directly at info@crochetcrafty.com. And I'm very happy to help you out. Make sure you do attach a copy of your work when you're emailing me. And that way I can have a closer look and can probably better answer your question. And as always, come visit me on the Crochet Crafty website. There's a lot of fantastic tools there for you to help you with any of your crochet projects, as well as a bunch of free written patterns and a link to my Etsy shop. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this week's tutorial. I hope you have an amazing day. As always, happy crocheting. Take good care of yourselves. I look forward to seeing what kind of colors you choose for your cardigan. And oh yeah, come visit me. I'm at Facebook and Instagram at The Stitch Session. So make sure to tag me in any of your projects. All right, guys, that's it for me. I'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.